You used it this morning, you'll use it tonight. It sits on your sink, completely unnoticed, a boring, mundane block of fat and oil. But what if I told you this exact object sparked a scientific revolution, brought down multi-million-dollar empires, and saved more human lives than penicillin, vaccines, or any medical breakthrough in history? And yet, the brilliant mind who finally proved to the world that it worked was branded a lunatic, locked in a madhouse, and beaten to death. I'm Evan Carter, and this is Hidden Object History. Today, we are uncovering the dark, blood-stained past of the most important weapon humanity ever invented, a simple bar of soap. Our story begins nearly 5,000 years ago in ancient Babylon. In the 1930s, archaeologists cracked open a sealed clay cylinder dating back to 2800 BC. Expecting to find records of great wars, they instead found a recipe: animal fat boiled with wood ash. That's it. It's the foundational formula for what we now call saponification. At a molecular level, when you mix intense heat, alkaline salts from ash, and triglycerides from fat, they violently mutate into a substance that can bind to both water and oil simultaneously. But the Babylonians weren't using it to wash their hands. To them, soap was a heavy-duty industrial chemical used to strip the grease out of raw wool before dyeing. Because it was incredibly expensive to make, clean clothes instantly became the ultimate ancient status symbol. If you smelled neutral and wore bright colors, it meant you were elite. Cleanliness wasn't about health, it was about raw economic power. As the formula traveled down the Nile, the Egyptians weaponized it. The Ebers Papyrus from 1500 BC reveals they mixed animal fats with vegetable oils to create a medical ointment to cure horrific skin diseases. They even used soap-based compounds in mummification to preserve corpses for eternity. Then the Greeks stepped in, swapping out animal grease for their abundant local olive oil, creating a gentler premium blend. But it was the Roman Empire that took soap and built an entire civilization around it. They took a Celtic word, sapo, and turned it into a cultural obsession. Roman bathhouses, the Thermae caves, became the physical, social media of the ancient world. You didn't just go there to get clean, you went there to close political deals, gossip, network, and flex your wealth. Pliny the Elder even wrote a literal manufacturing guide on how to mix goat tallow with beechwood ash. The Romans exported soap from the sands of Spain to the rainy hills of Britain, making cleanliness the backbone of an empire. But in 476 AD, Rome fell, and when the empire collapsed, Europe threw the soap out with the bathwater. Infrastructure crumbled, aqueducts dried up, and public bathhouses were abandoned. For centuries, Europe entered a literal dark age of filth. Bathing became taboo. Some religious leaders even claimed washing your body was a sin that opened your pores to evil spirits. This catastrophic rejection of basic hygiene turned European cities into giant incubators for disease. When the Black Death arrived in the 14th century, it encountered a population that hadn't washed properly in generations. It wiped out a third of the continent. But while Europe was rotting in its own grime, the Islamic world was living in a golden age of science and hygiene. While Europeans thought diseases came from bad air, a Persian chemist named al-Razi was running rigorous laboratory experiments. In the late 800s, he published Kitab al-Asrar, the Book of Secrets, proving that vegetable oil-based soaps were vastly superior and more sanitary than rotting animal fats. In Syria, artisans in Aleppo perfected the world's first hard luxury soap using olive and laurel oils. When European crusaders marched into the Middle East, they were stunned by many things, but nothing shocked them quite like how clean their adversaries were. The Crusaders literally established dedicated wartime trade routes just to smuggle Aleppo soap back to Europe. Soap returned to the West as a luxury spoil of war. By the 1800s, soap-making guilds were thriving in Europe, but governments still treated it as a luxury, taxing it heavily. Clean hands were still a privilege of the rich. And that brings us to the darkest chapter of our story, Vienna, 1847. In Vienna's General Hospital, a young Hungarian doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed a horrifying statistical anomaly. The hospital had two maternity wards. In Ward 1, run by elite medical doctors and students, women were dying of childbed fever at a shocking rate of over 13%. In Ward 2, run entirely by midwives, the death rate was barely 1%. It was so bad that pregnant women would literally give birth in the freezing streets rather than enter Ward 1. Semmelweis investigated every variable. Then he noticed a sickening detail. The doctors in Ward 1 would spend their mornings performing autopsies on rotting corpses and then walk straight into the maternity ward to deliver babies without ever washing their hands. The midwives in Ward 2 never touched corpses. Semmelweis had a radical, simple epiphany. He ordered every doctor to wash their hands in a chlorinated lime solution before touching a patient. The results were instantaneous. The death rate plummeted from 13% to just over 1%. He had found a cure for mass death. You would think he was hailed as a savior. Instead, the medical elite were deeply offended. The very idea that gentlemen doctors could have dirty hands carrying death was treated as an insult. They ridiculed him, destroyed his career, and cast him out. Desperate and losing his mind with frustration, Semmelweis began writing letters calling obstetricians irresponsible murderers. In 1865, his colleagues tricked him. They lured him to a mental asylum under the pretense of a medical visit. When he realized what was happening and tried to fight his way out, the guards severely beat him. He died 14 days later from infected wounds at just 47 years old. The man who tried to save the world with clean hands died from a lack of them. It took decades for Louis Pasteur's germ theory to finally vindicate Semmelweis. But once the world woke up, the soap industry exploded. In 1791, Nicolas Leblanc invented a process to mass-produce soda ash from common salt, dropping manufacturing costs through the floor. Suddenly, soap wasn't just for kings, it belonged to the masses. In America, companies like Procter & Gamble weaponized marketing, turning cleanliness is next to godliness into a multi-billion-dollar cultural mandate. When World Wars I and II cut off global supplies of natural fats, corporate chemists engineered synthetic alternatives. We call them detergents. And here is the ultimate corporate twist. That liquid hand wash on your counter and that bar in your shower. They aren't actually soap, they are petroleum-derived synthetic detergents. True soap, made the ancient way with fat and lye, is now a specialty luxury item. The modern world replaced the original, but then came March 2020. A novel coronavirus brought the entire global economy to a screeching halt. Hand sanitizers vanished from shelves, panic set in, and that's when a chemistry professor named Pally Thordarson posted a viral thread that reminded us how nature actually works. A virus is essentially a fragile strand of genetic code trapped inside a delicate bubble of fat and oil called a lipid membrane. Soap molecules are shaped like tiny pins. The head loves water, the tail loves fat. When I wash your hands for 20 seconds, those chemical tails violently wedge themselves into the virus's fatty shield. They act like crowbars, literally ripping the virus apart at a molecular level, leaving it completely dead. Alcohol-based sanitizers neutralize the virus, but soap goes a step further. Its dual nature physically detaches the broken viral debris, dirt, and bacteria from your skin, washing them permanently down the drain. Think about that. In a world of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and space travel, our ultimate shield against a 21st century global apocalypse wasn't a complex synthetic drug. It was a 5,000-year-old recipe of fat and ash. Soap didn't just clean our skin, it laid the foundations of global trade, exposed the deadly arrogance of science, and rewrote human survival. The most revolutionary technology in your house has been sitting in your soap dish the entire time. Every ordinary object has an extraordinary secret. Next week, we're looking at history from a completely different angle, literally. We are diving into the twisted, paranoid history of the mirror. If you want to uncover the hidden stories behind the world around you, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and let me know in the comments below. What everyday object should we investigate next? See you next week.